December 2020, as we prepared for Hanukkah, we received the devastating news that we had lost one of our leading lights, Rabbi Dr Irving Jacobs, Harav Yitzchak ben Shlomo Zichrono Livracha, who passed away on the 23rd of Kislev, 5781. Our wishes of Nechama and our condolences are extended to Mrs. Ann Jacobs, Raquel, Eve, Shosh, Shmuel, and all of the Jacobs family. Rabbi Jacobs was raised in East London, where, as he noted with his characteristic sense of humour, every Shabbat he and his family went to West Ham United Synagogue. That's about as good as I can get in trying to replicate his humour. From there he went to Jews College, where he served with distinction for many decades, eventually becoming the principal. He also held positions as the rabbi of Sutton and District Synagogue and as the honorary rabbi in Neve Shalom for many years, as well as being the honorary rabbi of the Michael Sobel Sinai School. And as has become clear from the many tributes that have flooded in over the last few weeks, whether Rabbi Jacobs was speaking to Cheder students, to school students, to other academics, to rabbis, or particularly in his beloved Neve Shalom, he inspired many, many thousands of people. With this in mind, the Rabbinical Council of the United Synagogue, whose members have benefited from Rabbi Jacobs for so many decades, together with Adam Taub, one of Rabbi Jacobs' foremost students, have combined to produce this memorial evening. Over the next hour or so, we shall hear from some of Rabbi Jacobs' colleagues, friends, and family, explaining the impact which he had and his legacy. Our first speaker is Chief Rabbi Ephraim Mirvis.
With the sad passing of Rabbi Dr Irving Jacobs, Zichrono Livracha, the British Jewish community has lost a most extraordinary educator, mensch, and role model. As an educator, he made a deep impact on people's lives in so many different capacities. And over decades, there are students who today testify to the incredible inspiration they continue to derive from everything that he taught them. And just to sit in one of his classes, I once, while running the Kinloss Learning Center, invited him to give a series on Midrash, and I attended some of those lectures. It was absolutely extraordinary. It was a masterclass in how to bring the material to life. And in terms of Midrash, I believe he was at a world-class standard, and it was such a privilege for us to have him within our community. As a mensch, what a delightful person he was. And he was an anav. He was so humble, so modest with regard to the immense knowledge that he had attained, but he was just a regular person in your midst. He hid it all with deep humility. But for me, he stood out most of all as a role model because he was a person of deep principle. Let me share with you just one example. In the year 2000, I was then the chairman of the Rabbinical Council of the United Synagogue. At that time, every year, we held a summer evening dinner for all our rabbis and rebbitzins. And each year we chose a different restaurant in which to stage the event, and we would have a guest speaker. In that year, we wanted Rabbi Jacobs to be our guest of honor. We invited him to speak. We told him the date and the venue. The venue was a restaurant which actually closed quite soon after that. And Rabbi Jacobs had a problem. He said, "Oh, thank you so much for the honor, but I can't go to that restaurant." And I was thinking, what's wrong with the kashrut? But he explained. He said that he happened to know that the proprietor was somebody whose ethical values were such that he felt it would be wrong for him to cross the threshold to go inside. So he said, "I'm sorry, I can't do it." Well, we couldn't convince him otherwise. So instead, we held the dinner that year in the Kinloss Hall. I remember my wife catered it. It was a special occasion. He spoke really brilliantly and in such an inspirational manner. But that was the sense of principle that he had. For him, kashrus went beyond food. Kashrus is also who you are, what your principles of life are about, what your level of morality is, what kind of ethical values you have. And it was with that same temperament and outlook that he conducted himself when he was principal of Jews College, and therefore he will always be remembered and treasured so deeply by us all for being that special person, an incredible educator, a wonderful mensch, and a true role model for us all, and so he will remain for all time. I extend our nechama to his dear Rebbetzin, to all his family. May you be comforted in your sad loss and in the knowledge that Rabbi Dr. Jacobs will always be a very precious person in our hearts and in our minds. Yehi zichro baruch. May his memory be for an eternal blessing. Amen.
Thank you, Chief Rabbi, for that heartfelt tribute. We shall now hear from Shosh Waldman, one of Rabbi Jacobs' daughters, on behalf of the Jacobs family.
I feel very honoured to be speaking on behalf of my mother Anne, siblings Raquel, Eve and Shmuel. As a family, we are so grateful to everyone for the amazing outpour of love and stories of how wonderful our father was as a person, rabbi, teacher and friend. And although a great source of comfort, it doesn't come as any surprise. I was always fortunate enough, whilst he was still with us, to meet people who were willing to tell me how they knew him, how special he was. They would ask me to pass on a message thinking that he wouldn't remember them, but amazingly he always did. He had a memory bank for people, facts, languages, Torah and history, you name it. Most people use Google. We had Rabbi Saba. Almost every person who reached out to us said that they associate him with a specific prayer, parsha or chag, and would think of him at every time during the year when it came about. For me, it was always Havdalah. When I was little, I was allowed a small snack in the winter months around the same time that Shabbat came out. Whilst getting ready for Havdalah, he would always drop something on the floor, and I would rush to help him. When I'd stand up, it was gone. I would then spend the whole of Havdalah looking for my snack, which I was sure I'd put on the table. He would then drop something, and when I stood up, it magically reappeared. It was only one time that I stood up too quickly and caught the snack thief in action. I learnt 2 very important life lessons that day. 1, that he was actually a lot more intelligent than I gave him credit for, and 2, I should never keep my chocolate near him. It was on Shabbat that I would finally visit him in hospital after 3 weeks of only having contact with him via WhatsApp video call. He had suffered a great trauma to the heart and was unconscious most of the day. Shmuel and I took it in turns to suit up in plastic and sit and reassure him. Around 5 p.m, the nurses were able to properly wake him up. They asked him if he knew where he was, what day it was, and if he knew what had happened. He turned to me and asked if he had missed Havdalah. I said that we could do it together and he could choose the normal version or I could perform a song and dance. He gave me a look that I haven't seen since I was a teenager doing something I definitely shouldn't have. A normal version it was. From being unable to communicate most of the day, he recited the majority of Havdalah from memory. He improvised with things in the room for the brachot, but I thought it was best probably not to light a naked flame with 2 giant canisters of oxygen present. Havdalah is the Hebrew word for separation, and it is the verbal declaration made at the end of Shabbat or a Chag to separate the holy from the normal week. I feel that this is a very fitting prayer to be associated with our Father, as when it came to his interactions with people, he made no distinction or separation between those deemed holy and sophisticated and the lowly plebs like me among them. The heartfelt condolences came from top consultants and rabbis that he had come into contact with, who will miss his intellectual conversations and friendships, to the lady who worked in the meat counter in Holland and the bin care man who cleaned my parents' outside bins. He had the ability to make everyone feel special when he spoke to you. You felt like you were the only person that mattered, and he was there with you in the moment. This was no parlour trick or act he had perfected. He genuinely was interested and engaged with everyone. A lot of people have been talking about his legacy, his Torah teachings, recorded lectures, his insights into specific aspects of Jewish life and interpretations of ancient texts that will live on forever. I would like to think that we can also learn a lot from the way he treated people and try to take this upon ourselves. In a time where human contact is so limited, we should all think about the way in which we can make someone's day a bit brighter. It costs nothing to be kind and considerate, to ask someone else how their day is and if they are okay. We tend to stay in our comfort zone and chat with our friends and those that we have known for a long time. And even then, We sometimes think of something we could say or should say to someone we haven't spoken to for a while, and then in a split second, our attentions are back on the snack cupboard, thinking about how many things we can eat before the school run. Or that just might be me. In a time when we are waiting with bated breath for the new vaccines to be effective to allow us to return to what we consider a normal life, it's time to inject some kindness and warmth into those all around us. Tehei menuchato kavod.
Thank you so much, Shosh, for those beautiful depictions of your father, Zichrono Livracha. We thank you and your family for being able to do this at such a difficult time, and we wish you continuing nechama. Rabbi Jacobs, with his characteristic humility, would describe himself as being a historian. He certainly was a historian, but he was much, much more than that, as we know. In particular, he was a Rav and an Orthodox academic, being sure to use the tools of academia to bring more ruchniut, to bring more spirituality and more Judaism to the world. Our next speaker, who worked alongside Rabbi Jacobs in this endeavour, is Rabbi Dr Geoffrey Cohen. Rabbi Cohen was a colleague of Rabbi Jacobs at Jews College and a neighbour whilst the rabbi at Kenton Synagogue. Their academic interests, especially the study of tefillah, overlapped. Rabbi Cohen, who retired from the rabbinate after serving at Stanmore and Cannons Park Synagogue, continues to write and teach on a wide variety of subjects.
It is a sad privilege that has been extended to me to send a message of tribute to the memory of my dear friend, Rabbi Irving Jacobs, Zichrono Livracha, and at the outset to express on behalf of Gloria and myself our sincerest wishes of comfort and arichat yamim to Anne and to all her dear family. Irving was a fellow student at Jews College, a colleague in the rabbinate, and then a fellow lecturer at Jews College. In fact, we both made history in the college in 1963 as the first students to have been appointed as part-time lecturers immediately after having gained our first degrees. It remains a mystery to me how the College Council, the most conservative and staid body, came to make such a bold and for that institution a revolutionary decision, and more how they managed to persuade the existing lecturers, continental scholars with international reputations and old-fashioned perspectives, to tolerate our young presence in their august company. I appreciate how Irving was appointed, but I think I was just pulled along on his coattails. As we know, Irving stayed on as a full-time member of staff for 37 years, where he gained an enviable reputation as a scholar of biblical interpretation and midrash, and as a spellbinding lecturer whose presentations were always peppered with a large dose of humor and frequently with more than a touch of irony regarding the establishment, the criticism of the establishment. He served for 3 years as the principal of the college before being compelled, unfortunately, to retire as a result of ill health. He continued to lecture in Montefiore, to give shiurim to groups of balabatim, appreciative balabatim, and to serve for many years as the rabbi of the Neve Shalom synagogue, where he was loved and esteemed. Friends, I was asked to include a Torah insight. So given Irving's love of Midrash and Torah teaching, I shall attempt to synthesize these two themes. Now, students of Mishnah will know that the order of the 6 main Sidarim goes by the mnemonic Zaman Nakat, which stands for Zeraim, laws of agriculture, Moed, laws of Shabbat and festivals, Nashim, matrimonial law, as well as vows and Nazarites. Fourthly, Nezikin, torts, court administration, sentencing, Kodeshim, laws of sacrifice, and Taharot, laws of purity and impurity. Well, that all seems very neat and straightforward. There's one anomaly, however, associated with a small cluster of what are called Masechtot Ketanot, or minor tractates. These include Pirkei Avot, Avot de Rabbi Natan, Masechet Sofrim, Masechet Smachot, a euphemism for laws of mourning, Masechet Kala, Masechet Derech Eretz. Now, oddly, these are all tacked on to the end of the fourth order of Nezikin, instead of being placed as a sort of appendix at the very end of the sixth and final order, Taharot. How do we explain this? Well, to do so connects us with Rabbi Irving's speciality of Midrash and his love of teaching. And it also reveals a fact about the Torah syllabus in Talmudic times. One such Midrash in Vayikra Rabbah states, why do we begin teaching young children with the book of Vayikra and not with Bereshit? It is because the children are pure and the sacrifices are pure. Let the pure ones come and occupy themselves with matters pure. Now, the syllabus of school children, therefore, began with the study of Chumash Vayikra. It's almost certain, therefore, that the syllabus of the higher academies, the yeshivot, would also begin, albeit with a deeper study, of the fifth Mishnaic Seder, namely the sacrificial order of Kodshim. So if Kodshim was the first Mishnaic order, and they worked steadily through the Mishnah, then their order of learning would have been Kodshim, Taharot, Zeraim, Moed, Nashim, and finally Nezikin. If so, our problem, why did they stick the minor tractates into the middle of the order at the end of Nezikin, is solved. Because the answer is that in Talmudic times, Nezikin was not in the middle of the orders of the Mishnah. It was the last of the orders. And hence, quite logically, they tacked those minor tractates on at the very end of Nezikin as an appendix to the entire corpus of the Mishnah. Friends, the passing of Rabbi Irving Zichrono Livracha similarly marks the end of a Mishnah, if not a complete order of Mishnayot. He was a shoneh. He was a teacher of the oral law. He was a great expounder, an amiable and warm personality who's left behind a rich legacy of inspired disciples and whose life was a veritable Kiddush Hashem. V'shinantam levanecha elu talmidecha. Midrash says, teach them diligently to your children. That means to your disciples. Well, that is how you are to cherish your disciples as children, your own children. And Rabbi Irving did just that. V'nifkadata ki paked moshavecha. Irving, you will be sorely missed now that your seat is empty. Amen.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Cohen. Our next speaker is Rabbi Dr Abraham Levy, OBE, the Emeritus Spiritual Head of the Spanish and Portuguese Jews Congregation of England. Rabbi Levy is also a graduate of Jews College and a friend and colleague of Rabbi Jacobs for many, many years. Rabbi Levy heads the Montefiore Samicha program where Rabbi Jacobs taught.
Rabbi Irving Jacobs and I have been friends since we were both 18 years old. And for over 60 years, we worked together in friendship on many, many different aspects of Jewish education. I have lost one of my best friends, as I have just said. You see, I come from Gibraltar. My father sent me to Carmel College. And then from there, I went to Jews College. to take my degree. And it was then that Irving, who was then 18 years old, as I was 18 years old, became very good friends. I remember him inviting me for Shabbat to his house. I remember our meeting in different places. And then we had to start our BA at Jews College, not on Jewish subjects. It was a BA in Hebrew and North Semitic epigraphy. We stayed together, studying together. We got our degrees. Of course, he got a first-class honor. I didn't do as well. But that friendship continued till literally the last week of his death, before his death. We studied at Jews College, and something else changed then. And that was that from now on, they were going to allow girls to come into Jews College and take degrees there. And that changed the whole atmosphere of what was the old Jews College. But then there was a young girl who came at that time, Anne, who was to become his wife. She was half Sephardi, and I could see that there was a very loving link being created between the two. So whenever Irving came to my room to talk, I would say, well, Irving, come on, what's going on? What's going on? And then the moment they got engaged, the first thing they did was to knock at my door to give me the good news. And since those days at Jews College, we did so many, many things together. I then had to be in charge of the classes of the Spanish and Portuguese synagogue. Remember, in those days, over 50 years ago, there was hardly any Jewish school, and the classes had 100 or 150 students who had to be taught Judaism virtually while standing on one leg, because they only had 2 or 3 hours a week. But who was next to me helping with those students? Rabbi Irving Jacobs. And Rabbi Irving Jacobs, I gave him the 14 and 15-year-old. And to this day, these boys who are now in their 60s still remember the inspiration which Irving gave them. Only last night, Daniel Halfona, a very leading master of Spanish and Portuguese music and a scholar of his own, only last night, he was telling me, I still remember the shiurim that Rabbi Jacobs used to give us, and I never found the equal since then. We did many things together after that. I started the Young Jewish Leadership Institute. The Young Jewish Leadership Institute was the first attempt in England to give university Jewish education to young men and women. And we made a deal with the Hebrew University, who sent us their top professors to lecture once a week at the Young Jewish Leadership Institute. But who were the two most popular lecturers in those days for those courses? Lord Sachs, who was not even 30 years old, and Rabbi Dr. Irving Jacobs. They all came to hear their shiurim. And what was so special about Irving? Irving was a master of Midrash. Midrash is an incredible subject, but what you do with Midrash really depends on the sort of approach that you want to make with it. So after the Young Jewish Leadership Institute, I was in charge of the Montefiore Endowment, and we decided to give semicha there. And they had to have shiurim not only on Shulchan Aruch, but on many other things. So who was doing the program to do with Midrash? Rabbi Dr. Irving Jacobs. And our students who are now qualified as rabbis, they always will remember those shiurim. But there was more than just scholarship. There was tremendous integrity in Irving. It is that integrity which came out in whatever he was doing. And that also continued to a long time. But then, unfortunately, he got ill. And he had to be on dialysis 3 times a week. But our students wouldn't give up. So I arranged for a coach every week to take the students of the rabbinical diploma class to his house so that he could continue giving those shiurim for them. Because I knew that that was a crucial part of our semicha. And then he didn't get better. And we wish Anne and his children a long life to celebrate what they will be carrying on hearing about how so many people learned so much from him in so many different ways. May his name be for a blessing. Amen.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Levy, for your moving words. And also to Anna Wolgamuth for that beautiful rendition of Erev Shel Shoshanim, which is one of Rabbi Jacobs' favourite songs. Our next speaker is Rabbi Alan Plancey, the Emeritus Rabbi of the Bournemouth and Elstree Synagogue, the largest United Synagogue community, which Rabbi Plancey, along with Rebbetzin Miriam, led for over 30 years until their retirement in 2007. Rabbi Plancey is one of Rabbi Jacobs' longest-standing friends and colleagues.
I want to begin by expressing my gratitude and thanks to the family for having invited me to participate in this hesped at the end of the shloshim for my very good colleague and friend, Rabbi Dr Irving Jacobs. There's a beautiful posuk in Pirkei Avos. It's not a medrash, it's actually a mishnah, and Irving would correct me if I was wrong. It says as follows: Yehoshua ben Prachya Omer, Aseh lecha rav, make for yourself a teacher, uknei lecha chaver, and acquire for yourself a friend, v'hevei dones kol ha'odam lechavschus, and judge everybody in a meritorious manner. These three statements actually describe beautifully the life and the times of Rabbi Dr. Irving Jacobs. Throughout his life, there were many opportunities where he should have been given great honor, great covet, but he was not the individual who ran after it. He never got angry, because it says, Don is called Odom Lechavschus. He always found a good reason why things should have gone past him. He was the principal of Jews College, brought many young people to become Rabbonim. And this is what he taught. Aseh lecha rav. He said, make for yourself a teacher. Irving, you were my teacher. You were my Rav. Whenever I gave a drosha, whenever I had to write an article, you were always there to advise me, to help me, to make sure if it was a medrash, it was quoted as a medrash and not as a posuk or something, or a mishnah or something. That was something you taught me, but you taught me something else. And this is always what you passed over. Aseh lecha rav. Make yourself into it. It applies not just to rabbis, it applies to every individual. You always taught, make yourself a leader, make yourself a teacher. You've got a family, show leadership in that family. Aseh lecha rav. You can become the rabbi of your family, the teacher of your family. You were the teacher of Klal Yisrael, and you taught everybody to become like that. So many students, so many family, and so many friends. Aseh lecha rav. You taught me how to be a rabbi, and that forever I will be thankful. Knei lecha chaver. It goes without saying. The way I acquired you was to sit and learn with you in a phone, always with a Devar Torah. Knei lecha chaver. I acquired you as my friend, and you acquired me as your friend. And I want to tell you, so much heartache was there when we couldn't meet up personally. This was something which we have to understand. It was the way of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which we're all suffering now. We have to now learn all these messages from you. But you know, there was one other thing. You always got everybody with a big smile. Your sense of humor, your family man. You loved your wife, you loved your family, you loved your kehillah. Nevei Shalom was your family, not your kehillah, your family. Your colleagues were your children. And we're going to miss you badly. I will. And when I go now to find somebody who will listen to my droshes, my wife is fed up already trying to listen to them. She'd have heard it before. But let me tell you something. I could go on and on, Irving. We miss you. I hope in Mirvis Hashem that your wife and your children, all your 4 children, and your grandchildren and your family will be zeichet to see the Mashiach when we will have the Tchias HaMesim and you'll be back. I know HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give you the schus, the zechar that you have earned in this world to go there. I hope in Mirvis Hashem that you will be a Melech Yosef for Klal Yisrael, as you have done even when you were alive. You were always a spokesman for the Jewish people. That Yehei Zichra Baruch, may his dear memory, may your memory, Irving, be a blessing and an inspiration to all of us, your friends, your family, and Klal Yisrael.
Thank you, Rabbi Plancey, for those very warm words and for teaching us about the power of a chaver, something which you and Rabbi Jacobs had to such a strong extent. We'll now hear from Adam Taub, who has been a student of Rabbi Jacobs for many years. Adam is a faculty member at LSJS, where he has taught courses on Midrash and the sages of the Mishnah, based on the teachings of Rabbi Jacobs. Adam has also set up the www.rabbiirvingjacobs.org website, a collection of recordings of Rabbi Jacobs' shiurim, which we'll hear more about later on.
I first heard Rabbi Jacobs speak over 25 years ago, when he came to Hampstead Garden Suburb Synagogue to give a series of lectures on the life of King David. For 12 weeks, Rabbi Jacobs simply read the text of the book of Shmuel and translated it. No commentaries, no midrash, just the plain text. And from the text, Rabbi Jacobs teased out the complex politics of the time, the strengths and the flaws of the characters, and the breathtaking suspense of the drama. Each class was a masterclass in storytelling, and taken as a whole, the lecture series was a model of pshat, elucidating the plain meaning of the text, and it ranks as one of the great series of lectures that I've ever heard. If pshat is elucidating the plain meaning of the text, then midrash is the sages reading into the text what they want it to mean. And it was midrash that was Rabbi Jacobs' lifetime field of scholarship. In Rabbi Jacobs' memorable phrase, midrash is the workshop of the sages. It was here that they hammered out their ideas of philosophy and theology and expressed them through their commentary on Tanakh. Rabbi Jacobs was a fine scholar who wrote 2 books and a number of articles. But it's as a teacher that Rabbi Jacobs made his greatest impact. He taught at Jews College and at many synagogues and private groups. He had a tremendous and playful sense of humour that derived from his love of words. He could turn a phrase that would both delight and illuminate. Over the period of the shloshim, I've been listening again to recordings of some of the lectures that he gave, and they are wonderful. So rather than me talk about him, I want to share 2 clips with you that give a sense of what it was like to learn with him, to spend time in the company of a man who had complete grasp of his material and an unrivaled ability to bring it to life for a lay audience. The first clip comes from a class that he gave on Shmot Rabbah, the Midrash on the book of Shemot. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus is addressing the question of why God chose to speak to Moses from a bush.
Look at Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus first. Mipnei ma nigle HaKadosh Baruch Hu mishmei marom. Why did God manifest himself from the outer reaches of heaven? Yet he talks to Moses out of a bush. To indicate that just as this bush is the lowliest of the flora, the lowest form of tree life, so Israel scraped rock bottom. They went down to the lowest level in Egypt. Nonetheless, even though they were at that lowest level, God went down with them and redeemed them. Shneimah, it says, Va'irei, I have come down. I have made a yeridah, lahatzilo miyam Mitzrayim, to deliver them from Egypt. Message, even if your enemies put you where Dynarod cannot reach you, God can. And he'll get his hands dirty to get you. Message of hope?
Come down to your level.
Well, he's not merely coming down to your level, I'm coming down into the dirt to get you. And don't forget, that's precisely how they were. The Romans trod them into the dirt. That's why Rabbi Akiva has to say, in their dire poverty and their dirtiness, he says, don't worry, he says, poverty becomes the Jewish people like a scarlet thread about the neck of a white horse.
3 things strike me about that clip. First, the use of that startling visual metaphor. Even if your enemies put you where Dynarod can't reach you. What a brilliant colloquial way of describing the destitution of the Jewish people. Many people would reach for a cliche like in the gutter, but not Rabbi Jacobs. He always had a fresh metaphor to hand that would capture your imagination. And illuminate the text. Second, he understood that Midrash was not simply a tool of exegesis. It was the means by which the sages spoke to their own generation, how they fortified the spirit of the Jewish people. The Midrash may be a commentary on an ancient biblical text, but it's also an urgent message for the Jews at the time of the sages. And finally, the reference to Jewish suffering, which was a constant theme in his teaching. It reflected his deep empathy with the Jewish people throughout history, from biblical times to the present day. He was unflinching in his loyalty to the Jewish people and unwavering in his faith in God's love for us. As I was listening to some of the lectures he gave, I was delighted to come across the series on King David. This was the series that had enthralled me all those years ago, so I want to play you a brief clip. We joined the lecture at the beginning of Shmuel Bet. It is springtime, the time of the year when kings go off to battle. David has sent his top generals to war against the Ammonites, but he himself is left alone in Jerusalem.
Here is this powerful genius, in so many senses of the word, a military commander par excellence, kicking his heels in Jerusalem. You can imagine he is restless. And we are told, Vayihila Eder, and it came towards evening, Vayakum David Meyal Mishkavo, David gets off, he can't sleep. Vayitalech al Gag Beit HaMelech, and he was walking about on the roof of the palace. He's restless. But then something stops him in his tracks. Vayarish Arochetzet Me'al Agag, and he sees a woman bathing on the top of her on her roof. Vayishat Tovat Mareh Me'od, and the woman was exceptionally beautiful.
Now, was it customary to bathe on top?
Sure, what are you doing bathing on the roof?
And the palace is
Well, let us understand that. I mean, that's the first question.
My interpretation, he was looking down from the roof.
This is the point. You're on the right track.
She's on her roof, which is probably lower than his.
Sure, that's it. Right. Why is she on the roof? They didn't have blinds and shutters and so on. If you would bathe downstairs in your only living area downstairs, so passers-by would get a free look like they do in Amsterdam.
Very good.
So therefore, you go where you have some privacy. A roof was a flat area surrounded by a parapet. Can't be seen from street level, therefore it's an ideal place to bathe. But it can be seen from palace level.
That's good.
You see, that's the point. So David has a bird's eye view. Okay? In all sense of the word. Vayishlach David, and David sends, Vayidrosh L'isha, inquires after the woman. Vayomer, and Halozot, Bat Sheva, Bat Eliam. This is surely Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam.
So he knew who she was.
Oh, no, you say, wait.
Yeah.
Eshet Uriah HaChiti, the wife of Uriah the Hittite. That should have been enough for him to look at the other side of his palace roof.
Turn away.
She is a wife of a man. She is forbidden to him, regardless who the man is. She's an Eshetish. To consort with her is an offence against God's law, punishable by death. Niyuf, adultery. The king ought to know it. It's worse than that. Uriah the Hittite is one of his closest, most faithful generals. Uriah the Hittite is not a native Israelite. He is a man, a Hittite, who has converted to the belief of the one true God and has taken the name, the Lord is my light, Uriah. And he is a pious as indeed converts can be more pious than those what are born into it. And this should have been reason enough for David to back off. He doesn't.
Rabbi Jacobs was never afraid to let the text speak for itself. It's true that the Talmud in Shabbat states that whoever says David sinned is in error. And even to this day, you can go onto the internet and read long articles that assert that David never sinned and his relationship with Bathsheba was a holy act. Rabbi Jacobs had no time for such sophistry. The text of Tanakh is clear. King David was a great Jewish hero, but a complex, flawed character. The Tanakh expresses that ambiguity. But the sages of the Talmud could not afford to do so. Rabbi Jacobs would explain that in the time of the Mishnah, the Jews were downtrodden, defeated, dispirited. Judaism was besieged by Gnostic ideas that suggested its flawed leaders were a reflection of a flawed God. The sages of the Talmud responded with defiance and argued through their midrashic interpretation that our biblical ancestors were flawless heroes. It was a courageous act, scholarship as defiance. It preserved Judaism through one of its darkest periods. But Rabbi Jacobs saw it clearly. The pshat is clear. Rabbi Jacobs never took midrash literally, but he always took it seriously. And that's what made his orthodoxy so intelligent and so compelling. He was never afraid, not of the plain meaning of the text, nor of modern scholarship. He was never intimidated. Both could inform and deepen his understanding. And the other point I want to make is this. Did you hear the laughter all the way through that clip? It was the hallmark of every class he gave. People were engaged, entertained, enthralled. To learn with Rabbi Jacobs was a joyous experience of discovery, because no matter how many times he learnt a text, he always seemed to be rediscovering it for the first time. And in a sense, he was, because like the injunction of Ben Bugbug in Pirkei Avot, he turned the text that he loved over and over again, looking for new insights. In Rabbi Jacobs, Anglo Jewry was blessed with a scholar, a teacher, and a community leader of exceptional insight, of deep empathy, and of irresistible warmth. He lives on in the hearts of those who knew him and those who studied with him. Yehei zichrono livracha, his memory will be for a blessing.
Thank you so much, Adam, for that really erudite presentation and for bringing Rabbi Jacobs' words back to us once again. I'd also like to thank you for all the work you've put in to arranging this evening's event and, of course, for setting up the website. We'll hear next from Professor Stefan Reif, originally from Edinburgh and now living in Israel. Professor Reif is Emeritus Professor of Medieval Hebrew Studies and a Fellow of St John's College in the University of Cambridge. He also served as the founding director of the Geniza Research Unit there. He is a leading authority on liturgy who also studied at Jews College.
I greatly welcome this opportunity of paying tribute to a dear friend and colleague, Rabbi Dr Irving Jacobs, whom I knew for a period of some 60 years. When I was just beginning a role recruit, as it were, in Jews College in 1960, he was already, I believe, a graduate, and I greatly admired him and looked up to him. In the course of years afterwards, when I was more established as an academic myself, we became friends and colleagues, and I examined for him at Jews College and gave some lectures there occasionally, and sat on committees with him, and always found him a lot of fun and a very inspiring individual. When I was looking for the best minds in Jewish studies to lecture at Cambridge to the Cambridge Theological Society, when I presided over that body, I of course chose Irving, and he did brilliantly well, as he always did in lecturing. It was my pleasure also to introduce him to Alex Wright, who was the religious studies editor at Cambridge University Press, and they then made an arrangement to publish his Midrashic Process, which is a brilliant introduction to Midrash, very useful, and shows his outstanding ability to understand Midrashic texts. Irving was a brilliant lecturer, and an affable teacher, someone who would not compromise on standards of honesty or standards of learning or standards of religiosity, but at the same time was open to everyone and everything and all ideas. When I had any particular issue with something in academic life, I would from time to time pick up the phone to him and listen to his opinion. And of course, I didn't just get an opinion, I got some of his latest jokes outstanding. He had a brilliant sense of humor. As well as an analytical mind, he had a brilliant sense of humor, and it was always enjoyable to talk to him. So I shall miss a dear colleague, a friend, someone from whom I learnt and from whose publications I also learnt. And I believe that many generations of students will look back on Irving as an inspiration and an outstanding teacher. Yehi Zichro Baruch.
Many thanks, Professor Reif, for that extremely warm tribute, and in particular for the perspectives which you brought from academia. Rabbi Jacobs was not just a teacher, as we've noted before. He also inspired other people to learn and expound their own scholarly perspectives. We'll hear more about this from Rabbi Geoffrey Shisler, a student of Rabbi Jacobs at Jews College and a neighbour when in post at Kenton Synagogue. Rabbi Shisler, who writes and teaches about tefillah, most recently served as the rabbi of the New West End Synagogue in London before his retirement.
Throughout my life, like all of us, I've had many teachers. Some of them left their marks on me, one or two literally, and not just a few I recall with genuine pleasure. But of all the teachers I ever had for any subject, Rabbi Dr Irving Jacobs, Zichrono Livracha, stands above them all. I knew Irving Jacobs for many years. When I started at Jews College as a student in the Chazanut department in 1963, the age of 16, he'd not much earlier completed his first degree. And in my second year, he was appointed a junior lecturer, and I found myself in his liturgy class. Since then, I've had a lifelong fascination with the history of the Siddur, and I put that down in no small measure to Irving's lessons. But being a youngster, I don't think I really appreciated him then as a teacher. It was only when I returned to college to study for a degree that I came to realise how lucky I was and had been all those years before to be in his classes. I truly looked forward to his lectures. I studied two topics with him. One was Mefarshim, biblical commentaries, and the other was Midrash. Irving had a superb knowledge of his subject and a genuine desire to pass it on. He was patient, and if necessary, he'd explain a difficult point a number of times in different ways to make sure that every member of the class got it. While I've always appreciated the importance of having a knowledge of Hebrew grammar, Irving was the only teacher I ever had who could actually make it interesting. He also had an excellent sense of humour, and his lessons could be very entertaining. One of the most important things I learned from Rabbi Jacobs was how essential it is, when studying a rabbinic text, to place things in their historical context. He was always particular to contextualise what we were learning. Knowing the milieu in which someone lived often illuminates why they made a particular statement and can throw a completely different light on what they've said. Let me share with you a couple of novel insights I heard from Rabbi Dr Jacobs that still delight me after all these many years since I first heard them. I can't say if they were his own original thoughts, but since I've never seen any reference to them anywhere, I assume that they were, and they are certainly the sort of things that would appeal to him and that he would think of. The first relates to a phrase in Pirkei Avot, chapter 1, capital 13, where Hillel warns us, Udishtamash b'taga chalaf. Lishtamash means to use, taga means a crown, and chalaf means to waste away. So this expression is usually rendered something like, he who makes worldly use of the crown of the Torah will waste away. Rabbi Jacobs suggested that the word petaga could also be read betoga, the garment worn by a Roman senator. And he suggested that Hillel was, in a subtle way, warning that anyone who got too involved with the Roman leadership could be in danger of their life. Udishtamash, whoever uses, gets involved, betaga, with people wearing togas, chalaf, has to be careful because they might waste away. The second relates to a difficult expression in the Torah and the Seder Kitavo, where Moshe tells the people, Hashem emircha hayom liot lo la'am segula. The Sonsino Chumash translates this as, the Lord has avouched thee today to be his own treasured people. Dr. Jacobs made the ingenious suggestion that in this context, emircha is to be associated with the word emir, a king or a ruler. And God here is saying to his people, I have made you like royalty today, my own treasured nation. After people depart this life, we sometimes make statements like, there never was and there never will be another individual like so-and-so. It's not true, of course, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends talented and gifted people in every generation. However, the one thing I can truly say is that I never had a teacher like Rabbi Dr Irving Jacobs, and still hope that I may be fortunate one day to find someone like him. I haven't yet. Zichro Baruch, his memory is indeed for a blessing.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Shisler, for these really important perspectives on being a student of and then colleague of Rabbi Jacobs as well. We'll hear in a similar vein from Rabbi Geoffrey Hyman. Rabbi Hyman is the rabbi of the South End and Westcliff Hebrew congregation, having served as a rabbi for over 40 years, mostly in United Synagogue communities. Rabbi Hyman attended Rabbi Jacobs' degree course classes at Jews College, which had a lasting impact on his rabbinate and fields of study subsequently.
Thank you for inviting me to pay tribute to the memory of our teacher, Rabbi Dr Irving Jacobs, Ephraim. Please forgive me if I refer to Rabbi Jacobs during his tribute as Dr. Jacobs, as this is how he was known to us in our Students' Day, and best evokes my memories of this great human being. It was October 1976, 44 years ago, that I arrived at Jews College for the new academic year. The college was located then at 11 Montague Place in West End, London, just off Baker Street. It was a most impressive building. It also housed a 2-floor library, a hall of residence, and even a squash court. On the first day of term, at the festive breakfast, I was greeted by Dr. Jacobs, sitting nearby, who smiled at me and said, "Don't look so worried. There's nothing to be frightened about at all." I attended Dr. Jacobs' tutorials for 3 years as part of the BA Honours degree. We covered biblical texts with the great medieval commentators, and in Midrash he unveiled the text's historical context and introduced us to the role of the proem, the introductory verse used in certain Midrashim. His lectures gave me another perspective far beyond my previous yeshiva learning. Whilst reflecting on these memories, I've been looking back on my old papers, listening to his lectures online and reading his book, The Midrashic Process. And I realized I was a student some 40 years ago. And back then, Dr. Jacobs was already an accomplished scholar, extremely knowledgeable, impressive knowledge. And so 40 years on, his knowledge must have at least doubled, because scholars don't stand still. So how can I really do justice to this great man and his great reputation as a great scholar, a world leader, in fact, in Midrash and Tanakh? But what I can say with some authority is that as a teacher, he earned our love and respect because he taught us with such love and passion, for his teaching was an expression of his love and passion for his subject. He was a marvelous teacher who had the ability to totally engage his students. His style was lively and fluent and always interspersed with humorous quips. After I graduated and entered the Smicha class, tutored by Reb Simcha Lieberman Ditzal, a Gerachos and Holocaust survivor with an encyclopedic knowledge of Shas and Poskim, I was fortunate to spend time in the staff room during break time. The staff room was occupied by Rabbi Simcha, Rabbi Dr. Sidney Lepper, and of course, Dr. Jacobs. These three scholars and Talmidei Chachamim were specialists in their own fields, and from spending time informally with them, I learned much. As stated by Chazal in Avodah Zarah, Yutes Amud Beis 19b, in the name of Rav, Shafilu Sichas Chulin, Shel Talmidei Chachamim Tzurich Talmud, that even the general conversations of scholars, Torah scholars, require serious studying. As it quotes a verse from Tehillim 1, Valer lo yibol, its leaf will not wither. In the context of the verses of Tehillim chapter 1, a person whose lifelong desire has been for the study of Torah, and in Torah did that person delve day and night, he is to be compared to a tree planted by the streams of water that brings forth its fruit in its season, and whose leaf does not wither. So the rabbis understood the fruit refers to the fruits of his Torah labor. What does it then mean? The leaf does not wither. It must refer to mundane conversations, that even the mundane conversations of Talmidei Chachamim, of these scholars, carries much meaning. And so I share with you, just as I had learned from these great teachers in the classroom, so I learned much from their conversations in the staff room, which often was about current issues in Anglo-Jurian. And it was these conversations which really prepared me for my days and years to come in the rabbinate. Throughout the years after I left Jewish college, I met numerous people that were touched by Rabbi Dr. Jacobs and spoke of him so highly. Like me, they had been touched by his warmth and kindness, touched by his wisdom and learning, touched by his humility and integrity, and touched by a man who lived according to the biblical adage revealed by the prophet Micha and greatly elevated by our sages, Vatznei leches im Elokecha, and walk humbly with your God. My thoughts are with his dear family, who I wish a long life, and that Hashem, Hamakom Yinachem Eschem, to his dear wife Anne, his children Raquel, Eve, Shosh and Shmuel, together with their families, and may his memory remain for eternity a blessing for all humankind. Amen.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Hyman. The perspectives you shared are an excellent example of how Rabbi Jacobs served as a Rav, a scholar, and somebody who inspired other academic pursuits as well as great Yirat Shamayim. thank you. Our final speaker this evening is Rabbi Dr. Martin Vandenberg, another student of Rabbi Jacobs at Jews College, who now lives in Israel. Rabbi Vandenberg served as the rabbi of Wembley Shul during one of the periods when Rabbi Jacobs was still actively involved there, alongside Rabbi Jacobs, of course, serving for many years as the rabbi of Neve Shalom. Rabbi Vandenberg will conclude his remarks with an askara, a memorial prayer.
Many words can be attributed to Rabbi Dr. Irving Jacobs, Harav Yitzhak Ben Shlomo Zal. But for me, the most powerful words come from the simple yet significant lesson we find in Perkei Avot. Yoshua ben Parachia Omer. Yoshua, the son of Parachia, says, Aseh lecha rav, ukne lecha chaver. Appoint for yourself a teacher, and acquire for yourself a friend. Irving was a rabbi to me, as well as my colleague and my friend, as he was to many others. He was a rabbi and a teacher par excellence, to whom we could all listen to, and he was a friend with whom we could all talk with. And together, as a teacher and a friend, we could all learn from. I had the privilege to first meet Irving when I attended his Midrash class at Jews College over 50 years ago. And over the years, we met on many more occasions, especially when we both lived in Maida Vale. And one of the greatest delights of becoming rabbi of Wembley Synagogue was to reconnect with Irving, who was a member, although he was also rabbi of Neve Shalom Synagogue in Preston Road. Irving would regularly attend Shachrit on Sunday mornings, and this afforded me the opportunity to renew our friendship, and he also became my advisor and confidant, providing me with so many insights into many subjects, including understandings of Anglo Jewry. In all these encounters, I found in Irving a man of huge wisdom, foresight, and great humility. Therefore, I, as I'm sure all of us, share in his loss with his family, with wife Anne, children Shosh, Eve, Raquel, and Shmuel, and grandchildren. And I pray that the Almighty will comfort them. Yehi Zichro Baruch. May his memory always be a blessing to us all. Amen. El Malerachamim Shochen Bameromim Elo Azilichot Chanun Verakum Erech Apayim Verav Chesed Hanose Chaparat Pesha Ve'akravat Yesha Unocha Nochona Tachaka Vehashechina B'ma'alot Kedushim Otorim Kazohar Akiyam Azirim Et Nishmat Harav Yitzchak Ben Shalomo Shehalach Le'olamo Ana Bala Rachamim Zochra Lo Letova כל זכיותיו וצדקותיו בעשות החיים. ותלו שערי צדק ואורה, שעריכם לאו חנינה, וסתה כנפיך תסתירהו לעולמים. וצרו בצרור חיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום המשכבו, ונאמר Amen.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Vandenberg. I'm sure we all felt the emotion and the power in those words. What a kavod to Rabbi Jacobs, Zichrono Livracha. We wish you and yours well. I would like to express grateful thanks to all of our contributors this evening and to all of you for having joined us. We now need to consider how we can continue learning from Rabbi Jacobs. As Adam mentioned in his presentation, Rabbi Jacobs wrote The Midrashic Process and the Impact of Midrash, amongst many other articles. In the Impact of Midrash, on the very first page, Rabbi Jacobs provides what, for me at least, is one of his most revolutionary expressions of what prayer is. Rabbi Jacobs teaches that in addition to prayer being praise of God, requests which we ask of God, and thanks which we give to God, it is ritualized theology, in that the Siddur teaches us every single day about what it means to be a Jew, what we believe, and how we should act. So Rabbi Jacobs pointed out, the beginning of the Aleinu prayer, our takeaway message from every fixed prayer service, which begins Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol, should really be translated, it is our privilege to praise the Master of all, rather than the usual translation of it is our duty. It's more than just a duty. It's a privilege as well. Rabbi Jacobs also noted that the beginning of the Amidah prayer, referring to our God as the God of Abraham, the God of Yitzchak, and the God of Yaakov, reminds us wherever we are that we have standing before God, not just because it's an Amidah prayer, but because we are part of the covenants that God made with Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So a Jew can stand as straight as they can and stand before God and address God. Because even though those covenants were made thousands of years ago, they are still vital. They still endure, and we are part of it. These are two tremendously powerful ideas which impact on my tefillah every day. And the more that I learn about Rabbi Jacobs' teachings on tefillah, the greater their impact on my tefillah that they have. So one way to continue Rabbi Jacobs' legacy is to daven and to learn his teachings about davening. A great way to do so is on a website which Adam Taub, with enormous investment of time and resources, has collated, www.rabbiirvingjacobs.org. On this site, you will find many recordings of Rabbi Jacobs' shiurim over the years, covering Tanakh, Midrash, Tefillah, Halacha, and other topics as well. There are also some videos of his Divrei Torah for Nevei Shalom, which have been added to the site too. This is a gold mine, which I hope generations to come will use as a way of studying and learning from this great man. And I hope that we can all benefit from it too. Thank you again for joining us this evening. And of course, the final word has to go to Rabbi Jacobs.
I know I've told you on more than one occasion in the past that Pesach is my favourite Yom Tov, my favourite festival. A, because it's a festival of joy, and secondly, because it is a festival of warmth. It's a festival of joy because it's our birthday. It was on this day that we came forth from the womb of Egyptian bondage into the broad daylight of liberty, of freedom. And for me it's a day of warmth because of my memories. My precious memories of Sedarim in the past, when I was surrounded by those who loved me and whom I loved in return, my grandparents, my parents, my brother, Aleinu Shalom, peace be on all of them. And of course now they are no more. But God compensates us, because for me Pesach is still a festival of warmth. For now I'm surrounded by my wife, my children, my grandchildren, and it is very, very good. And it was with these thoughts in mind that I asked myself a question. What is the significance of the Passover lamb, the Pesach lamb? You know that this formed the centerpiece of the Sedarim from the days of Moses right down to the destruction of the Second Temple. And now we've not had a temple for 1900 years, we still have a virtual lamb, if not a real lamb. It's there on the table. Yes, you've got a bone to remind us of it. But we speak as if the lamb were there. So I asked the question, what is the purpose? What is the significance of this lamb? And of course you may say immediately, well, we all know that one. It's to remind us of the Akedah, the sacrificing of Isaac, which, according to the rabbis, took place on Pesach. And you know the story. Isaac was reprieved. Abraham looked around, saw a ram caught by its horns in the thicket, took it and sacrificed it in place of Isaac. Hence the lamb. But if you think for a moment, that doesn't make sense. Because Abraham sacrificed a fully grown animal, a ram. So we should be sacrificing not a Passover lamb, but a Passover ram. But we don't. So we have to look for another reason for the lamb. Before I suggest that to you, just consider what lambs are like. Charming little creatures, harmless, defenseless. They don't have any claws and teeth to ward off their predators. And yet, for all their vulnerability, the species of sheep survives, remarkably so. There are sheep everywhere. New Zealand has more sheep than people. And it dawned on me that this is surely us, the Jewish people. We are the Lamb of God. That lamb represents us, because we, throughout our history, have so often been weak, helpless, defenseless. Yet despite their worst efforts, we survived. Despite our infant mortality, as it were, we have lived into the modern age. We have survived spiritually, physically, intellectually, and economically. And I think that there is no surer indication that we are the Lamb of God. He is Roenu, our shepherd. We are Tzon Marito, the sheep, the flock of his pasture. And therefore the little lamb firstly reminds us of our redemption from Egypt. But it is also a token of God's promise that one day he will repeat that miracle. He will redeem us again. He will take us back to our land, rebuild Jerusalem, reinstate the temple and its sacrifices, so that we will be able to sit within its sacred precincts and lift our eyes towards heaven and say, Shecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'yanu lazman hazeh. Thank you, God, because of you, at long last, we've made it. Let me wish you all Chag Kasher v'Sameach, an enjoyable, pleasant Pesach, where you enjoy the festivity and the warmth for many years to come.